There's acting, and then there's surrendering. An actor will step into a character, but a method actor, they'll let the character possess them. They won't just pretend to be someone else. They'll force themselves to become someone else no matter what it costs. From fasting for months to breaking bones to living in war zones with soldiers, the psychological toll of method acting isn't just a cliche. It's very real, and in the worst cases, it doesn't just impact the actor's mind. It destroys their sense of self. Today, we'll dive into the twisted dedication of 6 famous actors who push themselves, and sometimes their sanity, to the brink. This is what happens when a performance becomes your personality. And our journey starts with one of the most extreme examples in Hollywood, Jared Leto. Jared Leto didn't just dabble in method acting. He dove in headfirst and built an entire identity around terrifying commitment. Every role he takes feels like a personal experiment in pushing his body, his sanity, and sometimes the people around him to the absolute limit. When Leto took on the role of a heroin addict in Requiem for a Dream, he didn't rely on costume design or makeup. He physically relocated to the streets of Brooklyn and lived among real addicts. He wanted to understand their rhythm, their routines, their pain. He gave up sugar. He dropped more than 25 pounds in just a few weeks. He wanted the hunger to be real. He wanted the emotional numbness to bleed into every scene. At one point, his health deteriorated so much that he came close to being hospitalized for malnutrition. Doctors warned him. Friends were concerned, but to Leto, that kind of suffering was just part of the job. And yet, none of it compared to what came next. Years later, when he was cast as the Joker in Suicide Squad, the transformation wasn't just physical, it was psychological warfare. He wasn't stepping into a role, he was willingly walking into madness. With Heath Ledger's legendary performance still echoing through Hollywood, Leto felt the pressure to reinvent the clown prince of crime in a way no one could forget. And unfortunately, they didn't, for all the wrong reasons. Instead of studying Joker's psychology like a scholar, Leto decided to embody it like a possession. He refused to be called Jared on set. He demanded everyone treat him like he was the Joker, always. The persona leaked out into real life. He started mailing grotesque gifts to his castmates. Margot Robbie, who played Harley Quinn, allegedly received a dead rat in a box. Will Smith got a package of bullets. Other cast members were allegedly sent a dead pig, complete with the stench. He claimed it was method acting. He said it helped him stay in character. But what it really did was turn the set into a psychological minefield. Tension began to build. Actors were on edge. Producers quietly expressed concern. Behind the scenes, the crew had to navigate a workplace where fiction and reality had merged into something darker. And fans? When word of the antics got out, many were disturbed. Some thought it was performance art. Others thought it was straight-up harassment. Ironically, after all of that chaos, most of Leto's footage was cut from the final film. His screen time was minimal. The buzz fizzled out. And the performance that was supposed to be iconic ended up being a footnote in superhero movie history. When asked about it later, even Leto admitted that maybe he'd gone too far. But the Joker wasn't an isolated incident. This had become a pattern. In Chapter 27, Leto gained an astonishing 67 pounds to portray Mark David Chapman, the man who assassinated John Lennon. He binged on microwaved pints of ice cream mixed with olive oil and soy sauce to bulk up fast. The transformation was so rapid and so extreme that he developed gout and had to use a wheelchair to get around. Once again, his health took a hit. But once again, he chalked it up to dedication. Pain for Leto wasn't a red flag. It was a badge of honor. What's truly unsettling isn't just what he does, it's how he justifies it. He doesn't see these performances as extreme. He sees them as essential. He believes they're required to truly become the character. But when essential starts to mean traumatizing coworkers, risking your own long-term health, and confusing shock value with artistic depth, you have to ask the question, at what point is the performance no longer worth the price? And where exactly do we draw the line between method acting and self-destruction? If Jared Leto is a mad scientist of method acting, carefully measuring out every drop of his own mental stability to perfect a performance, then Shia LaBeouf is a walking explosion. Chaotic, loud, unpredictable, and always on the edge of self-destruction. In 2014, LaBeouf joined Brad Pitt, Logan Lerman, and Michael Pena in Fury, a brutally realistic World War II film centered around a tank crew operating in Nazi Germany. It was a movie about death, fear, brotherhood, and trauma. And LaBeouf wasn't content to just play a soldier. He wanted to feel what it meant to become one. So he went full method. He didn't just show up and hit his marks. He embedded himself into the world of his character with such raw intensity that it began to concern everyone around him. First, he trained with British military advisors. He spent weeks learning how to operate tanks, fire weapons, clean equipment, and march through mud with 70 pounds of gear. He slept in tents. He ate field rations. He gave up comfort and hygiene. LaBeouf famously refused to shower for the duration of filming, trying to replicate the stench and misery of a soldier who'd been at war for months. He developed open sores on his face and body from the filth. The smell reportedly was unbearable. Cast and crew struggled to be around him, but LaBeouf wasn't done. Before filming certain scenes, he cut his own face, deliberately. He didn't want fake blood or makeup. He wanted real pain. He wanted the wound to sting when sweat rolled into it. When makeup artists offered prosthetics or safe alternatives, he refused. "I don't believe in pretending," he once told an interviewer. "If my character's hurting, I should be hurting." And so he pushed the boundary even further. When his character loses a tooth in the film, LaBeouf made a decision that shocked everyone. He walked into a dentist's office and had one of his own front teeth removed, voluntarily. No prosthetics. And he wanted the absence of that tooth to remind him every time he looked in the mirror that he wasn't himself anymore. His castmates were stunned. Brad Pitt, who's no stranger to gritty roles, reportedly respected the dedication, but admitted that LaBeouf's behavior could be unnerving. Others described the experience as intense, bizarre, and at times unbearable. LaBeouf wouldn't sleep in hotels with the rest of the cast. He'd camp out in the woods or in his trailer, away from the crew. He would smear dirt on his face, shout at himself in mirrors, and carry the emotional tension from scenes into every interaction. But here's the thing, this wasn't just about acting. Behind the scenes, LaBeouf was coming apart at the seams, and no one fully realized just how deeply the cracks had formed until much later. Years after Fury, LaBeouf channeled his real-life trauma into a script that would shake people to their core. The film was called Honey Boy. It was a semi-autobiographical account of his life as a child actor and the abusive relationship he had with his father. But instead of playing himself, LaBeouf played his dad. Yes, you heard that right. He wrote a story about his younger self, a boy raised under emotional neglect, psychological torment, and constant pressure. He cast another actor to play young LaBeouf and then stepped into the role of the one person who haunted him most, his father. It was performance therapy, catharsis through art, an exorcism of childhood demons. But the line between healing and harm became dangerously blurred. During production, LaBeouf admitted to relapsing into alcohol. He would isolate himself, lash out, and spiral emotionally between takes. The emotional weight of playing his father, of becoming his abuser, was too much. He later checked into rehab, where he was diagnosed with PTSD and complex trauma. Therapists described his symptoms as consistent with someone who had been both the victim and the vessel of unresolved pain. Critics praised the film as a masterpiece. Audiences wept. LaBeouf's performance was hailed as raw, vulnerable, and utterly fearless. But when the applause faded, LaBeouf was left wondering whether it was all worth it. In multiple interviews, he confessed that the experience broke him. He said he struggled to tell the difference between the scenes he filmed and the memories he actually lived. Sometimes he'd see clips of Honey Boy and swear they were old home videos, not fiction. He blurred the line between past and present, and then between acting and being. "I lost myself," he said. "I didn't know where LaBeouf ended and my father began." And that's when you know the method has gone too far. When the art no longer imitates life, it devours it. It's not just men who sacrifice their sanity for a role. In 2010, Natalie Portman shattered expectations and nearly her body in Black Swan, a haunting, surreal psychological thriller that blurred the lines between ambition and insanity. The film follows Nina Sayers, a young ballerina with dreams of perfection who slowly loses her grip on reality as she competes for the lead role in Swan Lake. But while the film was fiction, the mental and physical deterioration Portman endured behind the scenes was very real. To prepare for the role, Portman trained like an elite Olympic athlete. For over a year, she devoted herself to ballet with a military-level schedule, 5 to 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, pushing her body to the brink. She worked with professional choreographers, endured non-stop rehearsals, and retrained her muscle memory until every movement was graceful and exact. In interviews, she said it was the hardest physical preparation she had ever done in her life, and the most punishing. She lost more than 20 pounds from her already small frame. Her ribs became visible, her limbs skeletal. She sustained multiple injuries, dislocating a shoulder, twisting ankles, and working through torn ligaments. She admitted to surviving on little more than almonds and carrots for months, barely fueling her body enough to stand, let alone dance. Her fingernails became brittle. Her hair started thinning. Her menstrual cycle stopped entirely. Her life wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to Nina, The emotional toll was just as severe. As she immersed herself deeper into the character's unraveling mind, Portman began to feel her own sense of self dissolve. She described hallucinations, seeing mirrors move on their own, catching shadows that weren't there. She suffered frequent panic attacks. Her anxiety spiked. The distinction between Nina's neurosis and her own began to blur. She became paranoid, restless, consumed by the fear of failure. Director Darren Aronofsky wasn't exactly a calming influence. He would whisper different things to Portman and her co-star Mila Kunis, creating jealousy and tension between them in real life to mirror their on-screen rivalry. He pushed them to the edge of emotional exhaustion, and they delivered. The film premiered to critical acclaim. Audiences were mesmerized. Critics were stunned. Natalie Portman won the Academy Award for Best Actress, but she paid a steep price for the gold statue. Behind the scenes, Portman was falling apart. She collapsed on set multiple times due to exhaustion and dehydration. After filming Wrapped, she required months of physical therapy just to walk and move normally again. But the physical damage was easier to heal than the psychological wounds. "I felt like I didn't exist," she said later. "I was not a person. I was a shell." It took her over a year to feel like herself again, to rebuild her mind and body, to stop hearing Nina's voice whispering self-doubt in her ear. The price of perfection wasn't just pain, it was temporary identity loss. And Natalie Portman isn't the only one who's paid that price. In the world of method acting, the role may end when the credits roll, but the damage, that can last forever. If even one of these stories made your jaw drop, hit the like button. If all of them shocked you, subscribe, because we're just getting started. Comment below. Which actor do you think went the farthest? And if you're watching this while working, driving, or just avoiding your problems like me, I appreciate you being here. All right, back to the madness. Christian Bale isn't just a method actor. He's a human pendulum, swinging violently between starvation and obesity, sanity and obsession, until his body and mind are barely recognizable. If you want to see the limits of what a human being will endure for a role, look no further than Bale's filmography. It reads like a diary of punishment. In The Machinist, Bale portrayed an insomniac factory worker haunted by guilt, paranoia, and physical decay. To look the part, he lost over 60 pounds in just a few months. His daily diet? 1 apple and 1 can of tuna. That's it. He turned away meals, skipped social outings, and worked out obsessively, not to build strength, but to waste away. His body shriveled to 110 pounds. You could count every rib. His shoulders jutted like knife blades. Doctors warned him that his internal organs were beginning to fail. Friends begged him to stop, but Bale wouldn't. He didn't just want to act like Trevor Resnick, he wanted to disappear like him. Most actors would have needed a year to recover from that kind of physical trauma. But Bale, he had just months before his next role, and that role was Batman. For Batman Begins, he gained over 100 pounds, bulking up with an intense mix of heavy lifting and gorging. He reportedly ate every few hours and lifted 6 days a week. He went from a skeleton to a tank. Then, right before filming, producers told him he looked too big, too bulky to move like Batman. So Bale cut down again, quickly, losing the fat and sculpting himself into something leaner, meaner, and more superhero-like. His body went through 3 full transformations, malnourished to obese to shredded, all within a single year. But it wasn't just the weight that changed. His mind went with it. In American Psycho, Bale played Patrick Bateman, a Wall Street psychopath, hiding behind charm and narcissism. To prepare, Bale studied real serial killers. He recorded himself smiling in the mirror for hours. He rehearsed phone calls with emotionless detachment. And, bizarrely, he said he based Bateman's persona on Tom Cruise. Specifically, Cruise's intense friendliness with nothing behind the eyes. That eerie, hollow cheerfulness became Bateman's signature, and audiences felt it. Years later, Bale transformed yet again, this time into Dick Cheney for Vice. He gained 45 pounds, shaved his head, bleached his eyebrows, and contorted his posture to match Cheney's quiet power. He even adopted a distinct, shallow breathing style that made some cast members uncomfortable. His voice deepened, his movements slowed. He wasn't acting like Cheney, he was becoming him. Over and over, Bale pushed the envelope, losing 60 pounds, gaining 100, losing 40, gaining 45. And for what? To tell the truth, through the body of a lie. But here's the paradox. In interviews, Bale rarely talks about it as if it's a big deal. He downplays the madness. It's just what you do, he says. You become the role. That's acting. To Bale, there's no applause for the suffering. There's just expectation. But most people don't equate acting with malnutrition, identity collapse, or liver strength. Most people don't have to disappear into a new person every year, only to claw their way back out again. So the question lingers, is this still acting? Or has Christian Bale turned his body into a tool of controlled destruction? Adrien Brody's Oscar-winning role in The Pianist is one of the greatest performances in film history, but it cost him everything. To prepare for the role of Władysław Szpilman, a Polish-Jewish pianist who survived the Holocaust, Brody sold his apartment, left his girlfriend, and moved to Europe with only 2 bags and his keyboard. He lost over 30 pounds and isolated himself for months. He practiced piano 4 hours a day until his fingers bled. Brody wanted to feel hunger, loneliness, despair, and he did. After filming, Brody couldn't feel joy. He said in an interview, "I was depressed for over a year. It changed me. It changed how I see people." But that wasn't enough. Brody dove even deeper. He refused to see his family, cut off friends, and lived in near poverty to understand what it meant to lose everything. When he finally returned home, he felt empty. He had become a shell, and even though he won the Oscar, he never truly returned to who he was before. Val Kilmer didn't just play Jim Morrison, he surrendered to him. When Oliver Stone set out to make The Doors, he wasn't just looking for an actor, he was looking for a medium. He needed someone who could channel the raw, feral, unpredictable chaos of Jim Morrison. Not just the man, but the myth. Not just the icon, but the ghost. Someone who could capture the fire in his voice, the danger in his eyes, and the poetry that made people believe he was born to die young. He chose Val Kilmer, and Kilmer chose to disappear. He spent months submerged in the life, the art, and the madness of the Lizard King. He read every biography he could find. He studied every available concert bootleg, every hazy TV interview, every recording. He devoured Morrison's poetry, mimicked his cadence, his slouch, the slurred weight of his words when drunk, and the sharpened edge when he was defiant. He didn't just learn the songs, he lived them. He trained his voice until he could sing Morrison's vocals, not just convincingly, but indistinguishably. Every scream, every whisper, every bluesy howl came from Kilmer's lungs, not a recording booth. And the transformation was so complete that even the remaining members of The Doors were stunned. Ray Manzarek, the band's keyboardist, famously said, "It was eerie. Val became Jim. Not like Jim, not almost Morrison. He became him. But the singing, that was just the surface. Kilmer wanted the internal storm. He began to dress like Morrison offset. The tight leather pants, the unbuttoned shirts, the boots. He adopted Jim's body language. Shoulders slightly hunched, cigarette dangling. A mix of rebellion and exhaustion in every glance. He walked like Morrison, talked like Morrison, brooded like him. And then he started to drink like Morrison too. Kilmer began showing up to set intoxicated, often unpredictable. Sometimes he was eerily calm. Other days he'd explode with rage. He'd argue with crew members. He'd retreat into long silences between takes. He would recite Morrison's poetry to himself in dark corners of the set, as if invoking something. The air grew heavy around him. Some crew members said it felt like Jim Morrison had returned. Not as a rock god, but as a spirit taking up residence in Kilmer's body. And the transformation wasn't just powerful, it was disturbing. Kilmer's mood swings became more extreme. He lost the ability to separate scenes from real life. Director Oliver Stone reportedly encouraged the breakdowns, thinking the instability made for a better performance. But authenticity came at a price. While on set for the movie, actress Caitlin O'Heaney accused Kilmer of physically assaulting her. She claimed he threw her down, shook her, and struck her in front of others. Kilmer denied the accusation. Still, a lawsuit was filed and later quietly settled out of court. Some defended him, calling it just method. Others saw it for what it was, a man possessed by a role he no longer controlled. After the film wrapped, Kilmer admitted he couldn't let Morrison go. The role didn't end in the editing room. Morrison stuck to him like a shadow. Kilmer couldn't sleep. He said he began having dreams, not as himself, but as Jim. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, speaking in Morrison's voice. He became disoriented, unstable, confused. Where did Jim end and Val begin? It took him years to come back, years to feel normal, years to step outside of Morrison's skin and feel like a person again, not a character. And even then, was he still the same person? You lose yourself in a role like that, Kilmer said in later interviews. And the scary part is, you might not come back. That's the hidden cost of method acting. A role can elevate your career. It can bring you fame. It can win awards. But sometimes, it can also take something from you didn't know you were giving away. Because when the performance ends, the possession doesn't. Method acting has given us some of the most unforgettable performances in film history, but it's also left scars, mental, emotional, physical. These actors don't just read lines. They live lives that aren't theirs, and in doing so, sometimes they lose track of their own. Is it worth it? That's the question no award can answer, because when the cameras stop rolling, when the crew packs up and the world moves on, all that's left is a person who might not remember who they really are. So the next time you're blown away by a performance, just know there may be a price behind that masterpiece, and the person who paid it might still be trying to find their way back.